And welcome to tonight's edition of Beyond the Lockdown, a show that educates and informs the country and beyond on the handling and management of the deadly novel coronavirus, as well as the impact of the disease on the various sectors of the economic development. I am MFR Pau, and tonight we put the spotlight on the phase 2 of the easing of restrictions as announced by President Akufo-Addo last Sunday. Right. Welcome back, and thanks so much for your company here on Beyond the Lockdown. Tonight we're gauging compliance, easing of phase 2 of the restrictions. And many of your questions have been coming in on this, and it promises to be an exciting show tonight. Once again, I have the Information Minister, Kojo Ponkroma. I also have the Director of Public Affairs of the Ghana Police Service, Sheila Beye-Bachman, and of course, Mr. Imoro Abbas Ibrahim. There's the PRO of the Ghana Private Transport Road Transport Union, the GPRT, who joins me in the studio tonight. So, Mr. Information Minister Kojo Ponkroma and Sheila Beye-Bachman join me via Zoom tonight, and Mr. Imoro Ibrahim is with me in the studio. Good evening, Mr. Ibrahim. I hope you're doing well.
Good evening.
Good evening. You're welcome to JoyNews and Beyond the Lockdown. Mr. Ponkroma, good evening to you, and to Sheila as well. Good evening and welcome to tonight's edition of Beyond the Lockdown. You would have to unmute yourselves. We can't hear you. Okay, so whilst they rectify that, you're all welcome once again, and we're ready to take a number of your questions. But Kojo Ponkroma, I want to start with you quickly, because just gone by in our news at 7, there were issues about intimidation during the registration exercise. This is the final phase tonight. I don't know if it's been brought to your attention. Well, you've heard issues about the military intimidating people, especially in Banda, and then, of course, in the Volta region. The president had cause to talk about issues about the registration, and saying that he's so far satisfied with everything he's seen so far. He hasn't seen any or heard any issues about electoral, violence or anything of the sort. But this is what we are picking up. This issue seems not to go away. Is it an issue that you're concerned about? Has it been brought to your attention?
So good evening to my colleagues who are joining us on various platforms, and to your audiences, and to you as well. Yes, this evening you have aired reports of alleged intimidation in, I think, one particular area that happens to be Banda, I think, as your report mentioned. And it is something that would need to be looked into and investigated. You know that as a matter of policy, you don't start off by believing or disbelieving everything that is aired on media platforms. The important thing is to ensure that it is properly investigated. And if indeed you have some persons out there who are being over-exuberant, who are not acting in accordance with the law, ensure that these persons are brought to book.
In videos also of the General Secretary of the NDC, for instance, engaging some military personnel, we're yet to verify exactly where this occurred. But this issues about military intimidation. First, we heard from the military some time ago. They issued a statement that that is inaccurate and that is just part of their normal operations. But does it seem to you, have you found out what exactly is going on? Because this is a number of reports that we are receiving time and time again on military intimidations in the Volta region especially, and then now in Banda as well.
To verify it. Indeed, on our tracking as well, we cited these videos just about an hour ago of the General Secretary of the NDC appearing to be in some heated exchanges and on the phone with some persons. Ostensibly, it's got to do with the registration and access of a group of persons. You can see some buses, I think, behind him in the videos. It's a bit unclear, but it's one of those things that also needs to be investigated so that you have clarity on exactly what is transpiring, where it is taking place, and the context within which it is happening. But as a general rule, all persons who fit within the bracket of persons who are eligible to register are encouraged to go out there and register. The security agencies are encouraged to act as professionally as possible in whatever operation that they are handling that may or may not have anything to do with this registration exercise. But on the specific, it will be important that it is looked into so that clarity is brought to bear on what was happening there.
Okay, so thank you. We have the Director of Public Affairs of the Ghana Police Service also joining us. Madam Sheila, I don't know, I would first want to take your assessment of the registration exercise so far regarding issues about violence generally.
I would say that generally security and order, law and order has been achieved. There are pockets of cases of assaults and violence that are being investigated and being handled. Some have even gone to court and all. But generally, it's been peaceful across the country. And let me say that the security officers deployed to the registration centers are police officers. So it will be very difficult for anybody to say that apart from police officers, other security officers come there to do other things, except maybe it's Operation Calm Life and then maybe as part of patrol. But the security officers at the registration centers are police officers. And assessment of the exercise so far is that there has been general law and order. We have recorded pockets of complaints of violence and assault which are being handled procedurally.
So what you're saying is there is no operation sort of together with the military at the registration centers, because some of the videos we've seen the military men at the registration centers themselves preventing some people from registering.
There are no military men providing security for the registration.
Okay.
And there may be reasons why extra security may be called in, which is not necessarily to come and give security for the registration.
Okay, well, so we'll leave it here for now, and then I'm sure during the questioning, some of these issues will come up. But Mr. Morrow, thank you very much once again for joining us here on Beyond the Lockdown. So there are a number of questions regarding, the easing of restrictions for you coming back to full capacity and all. But one main issue coming back is why transport fares have not been reduced. I'm sure Mr. Oponkruma will also give us answers to that. But I'm sure you've been engaging. Are we likely to see a reduction in fares anytime soon?
Well, good evening to viewers and Baraka Sala to all professional drivers nationwide.
And to us as well, Baraka Kade.
A special one to you as well.
Yes.
Yeah. So let's move forward, and maybe, God willing, since we are in the soup, we will definitely get out of it. So,
how do you mean we'll get out of it? Because those who board your vehicles are asking for a reduction in the price, because you made a case for us to increase.
Let me make certain things clear. We, those in the transport industry, knew very well what is happening in the country. After the lockdown, as your program stands, we petitioned government. And we did mention two things in the petition. We said, now we are observing the protocol surrounding the COVID or the pandemic by making sure we have the Veronica buckets, we sanitize. Any passenger we pick is in nose masks. And since we don't contract this disease by sitting shoulder by shoulder, we petition, and we did mention two things. We are appealing to the government to allow us to pick our full capacity, or it should allow us to share the number of persons that has been reduced from our vehicles to those that we are picking. We never had result. For some time, we re-petitioned again, and what we had was we should increase the fares by 15%, of which we started. That wasn't one of the petitions we sent to government. Now, we started with this 15%. Then later, there was another release on the restrictions that we should pick full capacity. And this is what we want to make it clear to the citizenry, that yes, we are working, and things have really changed. But normally, if we want an increase in lorry fares, we have to make sure we argue properly. We put our argument across, whereby the percentage that we are looking for could be considered, or a reasonable percentage could be given to us. Now, this 15%, then when the restriction was lifted, we were told that effective from yesterday, we should take 10% out of the 15%. Meanwhile, the 15% given to us, the communique attached to it was strictly on the social distancing in our vehicles. So if we are going to load full and you feel that social distancing, which we were suffering for some time back, you have lifted it, then there shouldn't be any 5%. We should lift all the 15% for us to come back and go and negotiate on the current upward adjustment in lorry fares. As I speak now, DVLA, the documents, has been increased by 10%. Why we are not in normal times? Why did they increase it? The permits we take has also been increased. Lorry fares, spare parts have been increased about 100%. Just last week, we went to buy an axle for a sprinter, which was around 1,000 Ghana cedis. Go to Abosoka. It's not 2,000 Ghana cedis. If we want to put our argument across, fuel, if you go to all the filling stations, they have various prices, of which nobody cares. Everybody, you have to select where you buy your fuel. Look at these fisher folks. Don't they use premix fuel?
Yes, they do. Who
controls the fish they sell? Nobody controls it, but I don't know, drivers alone, we are not even saying there shouldn't be. A case that there should not be any control? Yes, there should be a little bit control. And you see, there's one worrying thing. JPRT will practice rare democracy, even when Ghana wasn't practicing during the period of coups. We were practicing them every 4 years. You have to go to the polls. We have structures. If our leader or leaders, the Met government, and government decides that, oh, I'm going to reduce 10% from the 15%, which he knows very well that currently the operations of the transport operators have so many components that we use to run transport.
Okay.
And most of these components, the prices has changed. It has been increased.
Okay, so you talked about the DVLA and the spare parts. Well, thankfully, we have the information minister also with us tonight, and a lot of questions will come to you as well from those who patronize your vehicles. But Mr. Oponkruma, what really is the situation when it comes to these fares? You've heard Mr. Imoro Abbas on this, that they should take out the 10%, leaving out the 5%. They have concerns about these adjustments that have been put forward. What really is the talk when it comes to transport fares?
So, if I think, first let me say a specific good evening to Mr. Abbas in your studio. The big answer is that there will need to be some further engagement between the GPRTU and then the transport owners associations and the ministry responsible for transport. Because the brief I have is that they had reached an understanding. Obviously, if you listen to Mr. Abbas's comments, that understanding is not complete and they will need to maybe engage a bit further. What happened was that the transport sector is a sector that is of significance in this country. A lot of value chains start from the transport sector. So whatever happens in the transport sector, unlike maybe even fisheries, etc., has a significant effect on inflation, on food prices, on cost of goods and services across the country. And that is why it is always important for the policy maker to engage with the private transport operators and the public transport operators in determining fares. And they have a framework that they usually engage in so doing. At the last engagement, they came to the table not with 2, I beg to differ respectfully, but with about 4 things. And if you listen to his analysis, he actually mentions the 4 things. One, of course, was a question of social distancing, which was now making them run at some very reduced margins because the same cost, but they could only make about half the potential revenues they were making. So one was social distancing as a result of COVID-19. And they made a very strong case that even the science did not support the argument for social distancing on public transport. We'll come to that one. But one was social distancing. The other was fuel pricing. And the fact that the fuel pricing regime had fluctuated over a period since the last increase that they had, and that should be factored in. Number 3 was spare parts. Again, you've heard him speak about spare parts. And then number 4 was the ancillary services that goes with running transports, things like GPLA documentation, etc. When all of that was put together, the decision was made that they should be allowed a 15% increase in their fares, factoring into it about these 3 or 4 items that they had advocated on. Subsequent to that, the second level of easing of restrictions took place, in which instance the requirement for social distancing on public transport was eased. And I recall all the conversations we've had since then, some saying, why do you ease it on public transport and not in places where you're having religious gatherings, etc. And we've been at pains to try and explain the risk levels that differ between these two. But it was as a result of that, a re-engagement took place, and the decision was made to draw back or to tail back on about 10 of the 15% increment. And it is my understanding, the brief I have is that it's as a result of this negotiation or this engagement that this announcement was made that from the 1st of August, and it wasn't even with immediate effect, it was supposed to start from the 1st of August. If, like my good brother, Mr. Abbas, is saying, they still have points of discomfort with that, then the important thing to do will be to get back to the table to get that engagement complete so that there's a full understanding and full operation moving forward.
But one would have thought that would have ironed out all these issues before the announcement of the easing of the restrictions would have come. Is that not the case?
Well, the announcement of the easing of restrictions is not necessarily in tandem, for example, with price increases. That is based on what the task force is advising the president and the decisions he's making. But one would have thought that engagement would take place before an announcement is made of a 10% reduction, which engagement I'm sure Mr. Abbas would confirm took place. The comment he's making this evening appears to me that they are not very satisfied with the level of engagement, or that the perception that an agreement had been reached may not be fully founded. And that is why I'm saying that the big picture will be that they need to get back around the table, as in the ministry responsible for transport and our transport operators will need to get back at the table to tie up that understanding so that it can proceed smoothly.
Well, I'm sure he's itching to give say a word or two about what you said, but let's quickly get into the questions that are coming. I'm sure most of them are bothering on issues about transport and all, but let's get into the first batch of questions at this point. So we're on Facebook, and the Christian is saying, why are drivers still taking old fares? Meanwhile, they carry passengers normally. And I'm sure we've answered some of these questions already on this. But let's get on to the next one. This is from Christian. So on WhatsApp, this one says, please, we need the police and MMTD unit of the police service to enforce the use of face masks in trotro and other commercial vehicles, because there's no social distancing now, and it is very unbearable sitting close with other passengers who don't wear the face mask. What is the use then if passengers are not adhering to these protocols? I'll come to you shortly on that. Now, this one is from a concerned student. He says that, is government considering the rate of teenage pregnancy? The government should do something about reopening of schools. We are now tired in the house. And we stay on WhatsApp. This one says, some Ghanaians working abroad, myself included, have been stuck here since March. Please, the airport closure is negatively affecting our finances. Please, we beg the government to do something about it. So that's the first batch of questions, two on issues about transport. But let me bring in Sheila Beye-Bachman on this, because the issues about enforcement of the wearing of face masks and all, you have a role to play as GPRT also on that. But there's a general issue about compliance, for which reason tonight's program is put together, gauging compliance. Madam Sheila, what really would you say when it comes to your ability to enforce EI 164? I'm sorry, you have to unmute yourself.
Okay. I hope it's clear now. Thank you.
Much better.
So we have also gauged compliance. There are different levels of compliance coming from different sections of the public. And if I should begin from home, which is within the police service, it is very high. And then there are also facilities which have no mask, no entry policy, and so those places we see people complying. Somebody mentioned compliance in commercial vehicles.
Exactly.
To be honest, we have seen a high level of compliance in commercial vehicles. The engagement that the various sectors have had, including the police with the transport operators, is such that they themselves do not allow people to join the buses and the taxis when they are not in mask. And so that I can stick my neck out and say that we see a high level of compliance. Where we have had a bit of a challenge is in markets. at the open markets, traders, amongst traders, because at the supermarkets too, a lot of them have no mask, no entry policy. At the markets and places where people gather a lot, we don't see people wearing it all the time, particularly when the TV cameras capture them. Interestingly, you know that we have said from day one, since restrictions were introduced for the containment of the spread of coronavirus, that our approach has been one of compassion. Our approach has been one of engaging and explaining, and then we use arrest as a last resort. It will interest you to know that every police officer has been instructed by the Inspector General of Police to enforce mask wearing. You see the person not wearing a mask, as soon as you approach the person pulls out a mask, whether from their pocket, from wherever, and the person puts it on. So with the presence of a police officer, people wear their mask, even at the open markets. But then you can't have police officers being there all the time. So we continue to engage. We have never stopped engaging in our communities since these restrictions were introduced, and even as they are being eased. And we expect that people will continue to comply, because what we have done is to arrest as a last resort. Otherwise, we will have ourselves overflowing, and there won't even be places to put people. So we are really enforcing it. We understand that we're going to enforce this until sometime in September, unless the legal regime changes. And so we are doing it. And so to the person who asks the police to ensure that people do wear them in commercial vehicles, as now they don't have to social distance, we will do that.
Okay, so you've mentioned that arresting is mostly the last resort for you. I would want to find out, in how many cases has arrest had to be made as a last resort? Do we know how many arrests have been made over the period?
In terms of mandatory wearing of masks,